I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Badass Habits. It's the only intro Jen Sincero needs. Here we go.
Let's do it.
So, Jen Sincero, author of You Are a Badass. The whole badass thing became a brand. Now you just came up with the book, Badass Habits. How's it going?
It's going great. Remarkably so, since we're all still spinning around in this strange universe.
Yeah, it is a strange universe. And do you find that, what are the difficulties people have had coming out of the pandemic? Are they still as much of a badass? Are they more of a badass? Is it harder to be a badass?
Where does the badass scale leave them?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I'm having trouble being a badass, to be perfectly honest. Like, to write a motivational book in the height of the pandemic when I could barely lift my arms or get out of my pajamas was very interesting. And I think it really led to the book being a lot more interesting, and it let me get in on a bunch of different angles than I ever would have. So I'm pretty grateful about that. And so I feel like personally, it's definitely affected me, and I feel like people are definitely out there struggling with new challenges and overwhelm and confusion, and just sort of, I don't know about you, but my brain is not always available for work.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to dive into this Badass Habits book, because a lot of the bad habits you mentioned,
Yeah.
I feel like I've been developing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have them before the pandemic. And so, we see all these strange things happening in the world right now. Like, people aren't going to work anymore. Like, everybody's
Yeah.
having problems finding employees. There's all this supply chain stuff. There's
Yep.
wave 5, 6, 7 of COVID. There's so much uncertainty that must drive people insane. And I find that it's harder to have a positive attitude. And I'm curious about this. Do you
Yeah.
think you can talk yourself into a positive attitude? Like, let's say you suddenly realize, oh gosh, I used to always be optimistic, and now I think, oh, if I try something, it's not going to turn out well. I have this negative attitude. But am I just bullshitting myself if I try to develop the habit of a positive attitude?
Listen, I do not subscribe to the belief that we all have to be all Pollyanna all the time and think positive thoughts. Like, That is something that drives me nuts. And I think a lot of people think self-help is idiotic because of that. We're humans. We have emotions. If you suppress them, you're going to grow a tumor, right? So you got to feel everything. But to your point, I actually do think that there is a way to spin this, right? We are humans. We can spin anything. And I think this uncertainty that you mentioned, that really it's so like the rug has been ripped out from under all of us. I think it is such an opportunity to wake up to the reality. We're on a ball in infinite space. There is no certainty anyway. So, what does that mean? It means that it's always been there and now it's just more in our faces. So, I feel like it's an opportunity to stop playing it safe, first of all, right? Like, we stay in jobs we hate because there's quote unquote security. We stay in relationships because we're afraid we can't find a better person if we're not happy with that person. We stay with the friends that we've got because we're afraid if we don't stick with them and they're not serving us that we can't find better ones. There's no certainty in any of that anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is really an opportunity for us to stop kidding ourselves and to really face uncertainty and be like, all right, holy crap, I am on a ball in infinite space. Uncertainty is all over the place. So I'm just gonna really tap into what brings me joy and what feels right and do it anyway, in spite of these gigantic fears that are, sitting on my neck right now.
And I think the more uncertainty there is, the more people want to control, because
Yes.
to have some sense of that they know where they're going, that everything's going to be fine.
Right.
And I feel like that I was cruising along well in the first half of COVID, and then
Yeah.
suddenly it was like, you know what? I haven't had a good win in a while. I want a win.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you have so you define what habits are. You have lots of great stories. In all your books, there's always such amazing stories, and you have these 21 days for building badass habits.
Yeah.
And one of those 21 days involves surrender. And I feel like this is a habit or a process I've sort of lost a little bit.
Interesting.
And I used to have a really great, I'll call it a habit. I don't know if it's part of the process or a habit itself, but whenever things were difficult, I always was really good at surrendering, just trusting the force or
Right.
whatever. And lately it's been a little more challenging. So let's talk about it. Like, first off, define habit?
A habit is something that you do on autopilot. Your brain just puts certain things on autopilot and you don't have to think about them anymore. That's a habit.
So like a good habit might be every morning you wake up and you brush your teeth, or every
Right.
morning you wake up and you look forward to the day. A
Right.
bad habit might be you wake up and you think about that person who wronged you 6 months ago, and you really want to write that email to that person 6 months later. And the habit of thinking that way, the first moment you wake up, is a bad habit.
Correct.
Along with, all the usual things like
Yeah.
eating and
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
So okay, what's a time when you've wanted to change a bad habit?
I think though I talk about this in the book because it was such an epic one for me, but quitting smoking was huge because I still love smoking. I'm actually going to start again when I'm 85. I can't wait. It's totally giving me a reason to stay healthy.
But wait, what if they expand lifespan so that you can live to 150?
All right, then I'll just, I'll course correct. But right now it's 85.
All right, fair enough.
So that was a habit that it seemed insurmountable to me, and that really schooled me on how we can change something that seems almost impossible. I did a lot of different things, like, I talk about in the book how really it's so dumbed down. One of the best ways to anchor in a new habit and or get rid of a bad habit is ease. So if you just make it easy for yourself, or difficult for yourself if you're trying to quit something, that is incredibly productive. So, throwing away the cigarettes, not going to bars, not hanging out with other people who smoke, stupid stuff like that really makes a difference if you take the time to really get clear on the specifics of it. But for me, the thing that really did more than anything was the identity piece. So when you're changing a habit, identifying as the kind of person who already embodies the new habit is critical. So, for example, I started identifying as somebody who was really healthy, who had pink, healthy lungs, who took great care of her body. I did not identify as somebody who was trying to quit smoking or who was an ex-smoker. So what this did was it knocked out the negotiation process. So For example, I don't wake up in the morning and negotiate about whether or not I'm going to drink a bottle of vodka, because I don't identify as somebody who drinks a bottle of vodka every morning for breakfast. So when you shift your identity, you don't enter into the negotiation process of, oh, I'll just have one drag, or it's not going to kill me just to have one cigarette with this cocktail I'm having. You don't even enter into the negotiations because you've removed yourself from that identity.
So is that, again, like, are you trying to convince yourself of something you're not? Because maybe you are. I'm not the type of person to run a marathon, so it's hard for me to identify as that type of person, and my brain will call bullshit on me.
Ah, yes, that's an I love talking to you. You always nail me to the wall in these things. Yeah. So there's this fake it until you make it kind of thing, right? So you may not be up to speed in the day to day. Your habits may not be up to speed. Your identity may not be up to speed, but it's creating a new groove in your head. So you know that expression, we get caught in ruts, right? Our beliefs create almost ruts in our neural pathways. And identity can be one of those ruts where I'm an ex-smoker. It's so hard to quit smoking. I love cigarettes. I can't have a cocktail without a smoke, all that stuff, right? That's in my very, very, very deep rut of my identity. When you shift your identity, the new groove is way shallower. So you just have to keep instilling it. You have to you have to create an environment that supports that. You have to create thoughts. You have to watch your words. At first, it is kind of bullshit, but your desire and your intention can override the bullshit meter.
Yeah, I do believe that. Like, I remember identity is this amorphous thing. Like, there's no real, like, when you're with one person, you have one identity. When you're at your work, you have another identity. There's no real one identity that we have.
Right.
And I remember 30 years ago or more, 35 years ago, I was switching majors in college from like anthropology to computer science. And I came home for a vacation, and suddenly I was fixing the VCR. Like, so, that's an ancient term for
for you youngsters out there.
Yeah. So suddenly I thought I did identify as someone who fixes things, which I never did before, because now I was like in a science as opposed to, a social science. So I think you can like shift identity like that. But one thing I wonder is what's the role of consequence? Like, I have never smoked, but I imagine if I was trying to stop smoking, I would think, hey, I want to live so I can see my grandchildren or something like that.
It's huge. I mean, and that's what's going to keep you going, because if you don't attach to the consequence, you don't have, it's not just the initial excitement of changing something. You got to stay at it for a long time before it becomes a habit and before it becomes on autopilot. So staying really attached to your why, as I call it, why are you doing it? And that why will call up emotion. And we are creatures who are motivated by emotion, not necessarily rational thought, if you're anything like me. So it is about getting that emotion in your body so that when that, really tasty cigarette is in front of you, you don't go for it.
So what happened? So you identified as someone who is not a smoker. What happened next?
Then I threw away all my cigarettes. I had to quit drinking for a while because that was really my main trigger. And I just had this wall up around any negotiation process for me. Those were the main things. And I also did it day by day, that one day at a time thing. It's real, because if I'm like, I am not going to smoke a cigarette for the rest of my life, that's daunting. But if you're just like, just for today, just for one day, I'm going to see if I cannot smoke a cigarette. And then you do it for one day, and then you wake up the next morning and you do it for another day, and you chunk it down into manageable pieces so you don't have a full-on freak out about it.
I think that's really important, what you're talking about with the ease of getting into the new habit. Like, if you just try to stop cold, it's just not going to work, I think, in general. And how can you, it's almost like you want to if you're practicing archery, you want to bring the target super close at first, and then you'll hit a bullseye every time.
Yeah.
So can it work with smoking where, okay, I'm just going to have one cigarette a day, and then 2 weeks from now, I'm going to have one cigarette every other day? Or, how can you make all these, habit changing easy?
Yeah, I mean, everybody is different. For myself, I was such a glutton that it was, if I had one drag, I was up to a pack and a half a day. So I think it also really is about being real about who you are and how you work best. So maybe tapering off is the best way to do it, or maybe using the patch or whatever other things they have works for some people. For me, I'm a very extreme person. I am very all in or all out. So I knew for me, just cold turkey was going to work. But absolutely, whatever gets you there, there's no right or wrong way.
Right. And you mentioned that when you are around alcohol, you have to limit your alcohol because I guess, like, let's say you go to a bar, you have a drink, it's natural to take out a cigarette and start
Yeah.
smoking. And so, and you talk about boundaries and triggers throughout the book in terms of changing changing so you could have badass habits.
Uh-huh.
And uh, the triggers is a key thing. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm around a computer, I might look at social media, or if I'm, with family, I might have some negative thoughts. And you talk a lot about boundaries. I think it's really hard though to change all these things to kind of figure out what the triggers are and then eliminate them.
You know what? It's harder not to, because if you just let it slide and you don't sit down, I mean, and this stuff, it's so funny. Like, we get into overwhelm so easy. Like, I have so many triggers, it's going to be impossible. And then, or it's like that whole thing with email where you're like, I have 10 trillion emails to answer. I can't even answer one. So I'm just going to go take a nap. When you
That's me. That's what I do.
I know, I've been watching you. So, but then when you actually sit down to do it, like the other day, this is totally embarrassing. I hate taking showers. Like, I just find it so inconvenient, and like, I gotta take my clothes off and get wet, then I gotta dry off, and I have long hair. And I was like, okay, I am gonna time it so that I can stop being, I mean, and I do shower, by the way, people, but I timed it just so I could get out of my own drama. And I was like, I can like be from sitting down here and done with the shower, everything taken care of in under 20 minutes. So it took the drama out of it for me. I don't know. But I just think quantifying what your overwhelm is such an important thing to do, because those 10 trillion emails that you have to answer, maybe it will take you 30 minutes. And that's not such a big damn deal, but we get so overwhelmed by vagueness. So the same thing with habits. I'm trying to remember what the hell the question was, but with triggers. So when you take, I'm serious, like 4 to 5 minutes and sit down and be like, all right, so I'm going to quit smoking. And what are my triggers? And just make a list. Like, specifics are the key to freedom. So you make a list of the specific triggers, the people you hang out with, who you smoke with, the booze, first thing in the morning, whatever, when you get stressed out. Figure out what your triggers are and figure out how you can avoid them. Or an excellent other tip is, when that trigger happens, you replace the action of smoking a cigarette with something healthy. So for me, it'd be like downing a glass of water. Every time I had the urge for a cigarette, I would drink a whole glass of water, which would occupy my mouth, which was great. And it's also very important to hydrate. So you can use them to your advantage too.
That's really interesting to find a replacement habit. That's very valuable. So you talk about fears, that often we have fears in terms of changing our habits. Was there anything you were afraid of when you were stopping smoking? Like, were you afraid you wouldn't be able to hang out with your friends as much, or what was going through your head?
With the smoking one, I was probably, my biggest fear was that I would slip up and have to quit again, because believe me, I had quit a trillion times. I quit all the time. But I used that fear, actually was kind of helpful, because I was like, it's such a pain in the ass to quit. It's such, you have to just really gather all your strength. So I used that fear to my advantage. But I will say that for a lot of people, there is no change without loss. And I think on a very subconscious level, I know it's one of the main reasons that people don't change their lives for the better, because they are scared of losing old friends. They're scared of shedding their old identity, right? Talk about, the unknown and the unfamiliar. When you shift who you're being, you will lose people, you will lose your identity, you'll lose situations, you'll lose a sense of familiarity. And the number one thing that scares the hell out of people is change, which is hilarious, because it's pretty much the only constant we've got in this life of ours.
But we are afraid of it. And I think that's why we love our habits. Like, our habits
Yes.
define us, and they're shortcuts so that we don't have to change.
Exactly. But even the habits that suck, like that's why we stay in jobs we hate and relationships we hate and in bodies we hate that don't feel good. Like we'd rather stay the same instead of make positive changes because of that fear of the unknown and because of our love of the familiar. We see it all the time. I mean, it's to extreme, people stay in abusive relationships because it's familiar on some level. I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
Let's talk about that for a second. Okay, we don't have to talk about abusive relationships, even like relationships that are just not right for you. You're not
Right.
in love with the person or whatever. There could be, you're afraid you're not going to find someone. Like one thing I was always afraid of is that I would get out of this relationship and the next day I would get hit by a truck and be paralyzed and then I would never meet anyone ever again. That was my big fear.
So don't leave the house. Yeah.
Right. And I was afraid to disappoint someone else. Like that was the final fear there. So there's all these fears combined that are kind of unrelated to each other. How do you break these habits?
Well, you first of all quantify the fear. So when you do the kind, awareness is the key to freedom. So you become aware of what your specific fear is, right? So let's use your fear of what was it, getting hit by a bus the next day, and
then
okay,
I'd be paralyzed. And
you're
then I would never meet anyone.
paralyzed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very specific.
Okay, good. I love it. So you look at the fear. I'm going to get hit by a bus and be paralyzed and never meet anybody. So is that true? First of all, do any paralyzed people have loving, awesome relationships with other people?
Yes.
Right. So then you don't even know. Maybe because you become paralyzed, you will meet like this wonderful person that you never would have met had you not been paralyzed.
Yeah, no, it's really true. Like when I've been broke a bunch of times and I always assumed nobody would like me if I went broke. But I actually think overall I became a better, more self-aware person from the experience of failure and going broke and so on. And so you're right. There's that. Then there's the fear of disappointing someone.
Okay, so let's say you get into a new relationship with somebody awesome and you totally, totally disappoint them. Then what?
Nothing. Oh no. Okay. No.
Okay.
Then they could. No. I was always afraid they would talk poorly about me to people we know in common.
Okay, so they talk poorly about you to people that you know in common. Then what?
Then people will laugh about me behind my back.
Okay, then what?
I will lose friends because the person might have been lying, and so I'll lose friends because they were lying.
Then what?
I'll have to make new friends, and I'll be upset because I liked my old friends.
Who believe lies about you and don't actually ask you if it's true or not and give you the benefit of the doubt?
Yes, and believe it or not, this has happened, and I did get disappointed that my friends who were thought my friends did not give me the benefit of the doubt.
Right? So, and do you have some new friends who do?
Yeah, but fewer.
It's about quality, not quantity. Who wants a bunch of people who are gonna desert you like that?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's just hard. You get into the habit then you get into the bad habit of not realizing that this is for the best. You take the negative view instead of the positive view.
Listen, in the moment, again, you don't have to be all Pollyanna in the moment. Like, this is great that this woman has deserted me and is bad-mouthing me to everybody I love. Like, I don't expect people to go there immediately at all. And every feeling that you have about that matters and is real and important. However, getting so mired in it and only focusing and believing that that's the only outcome is going to create that outcome. And you're going to stay in that space of only looking there as opposed to surrendering and then welcoming in other relationships that you probably would never have made had you not been set free from the ones that ended up not being that great for you.
So it seems like a lot of changing habits is really focusing on mindset, like this ability to, like you called it earlier, like almost change your identity, or not like in a Superman Clark Kent kind of way, but or maybe it is in that kind of way, but more in a kind of just how you internally view yourself. And you talk about this in your other books too, particularly as regards, for instance, money, and you talk about that in this book. if you think to yourself all the time, I'm not the type of person who can make money, I'm never going to make money, as opposed to thinking, I do deserve money and it's fun to make money and money is, I'm free to make money. How how much of a difference does mindset make in a situation like that? Like, let's say I work just as hard, regardless of the mindset.
Right.
What's the importance of mindset?
It is everything. It literally is everything. So I'm going to go on a bit of a long-winded explanation because it's so, so important. So, that whole saying, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that is all about mindset. So two people can be doing the exact same thing, taking the same exact actions, but have two different mindsets. So, and I'll use myself as an example, like back in the day when I was living in a garage, totally broke, my mindset was, I'm not the kind of person who makes money. It's really hard to make money. I'll have to do things I hate. I'll lose all my morals if I go after the unholy dollar, blah, blah, blah. And so my unconscious mantra was always, I can't afford it, right? You could say anything to me, and my response 9 times out of 10 would be like, well, that'd be great, but I can't afford it. So when I started doing this mindset work and, started to really change my wealth consciousness, as we call it, I noticed that my mantra was, I can't afford it. So one of the first things, actually the first thing in that 21-day thing that I have in Badass Habits is we work on rewriting your crappy mantra around whatever habit it is you're trying to change. So I rewrote, and there's a whole way to do it, and it's all around emotion and specific words. But so I took, I can't afford it, and changed it to money flows to me easily and freely. Which, believe me, the bullshit monitor was going through the roof on that one because I was still living in a garage, driving a car with no grill, like the whole thing. But freedom and ease and flow, like those words when it came to money, were so out of my first mantra, but they also excited me so much. I was like, yeah, ease. Like, I want some freaking ease around here. It's just such a drama every time I make a dollar. And so those words had real meaning to me. So even though I didn't 100% believe them, I was really psyched about them. So every time I wanted to say, I can't afford it, I would force myself to say, money flows to me easily and freely. And so it did a couple of things. It made me feel better. Feels a lot better to say money flows easily and freely than I can't afford it, right? It's just, it's lighter. It's not as heavy. And the other thing it did, which I think is so fascinating, and I write a lot about this in the book, is human beings love to be right. We love it more than almost anything. And I believe it's because we're on a ball in infinite space and everything is uncertain. So we need to be right because if we're not right, we're kind of freaking out because we have no rug under us, right? So it's a very primal thing, the need to be right and sure about your environment and the way things are and to have some sense of security. So even when it's working against us, we white knuckle this need to be right. Like, I can't make money. I'm living in a damn garage. Like, who do you think you are saying that it could happen for me? It obviously can't. I'm in my 40s. It's never going to happen. Right. So I fought tooth and nail to be right about I can't afford it. So the power of shifting your mantra and your belief system to money flows me easily and freely is I'm no longer building a foundation of proof that I'm right, that I can't afford it. Now, because I'm still human and I still love to be right, I'm trying to build a foundation of truth around money flows to me easily and freely. So now I'm looking for proof of that. So even something as stupid as finding $1 on the ground, money flows to me easily and freely. Every time I would get a new job, like instead of being like, this, I'm never going to be able to survive just on this one freelance job that just came in, I would make myself be like, okay, see, it does. Money flows to me easily and freely. So it shifts your emotional state and it also shifts what you're looking for. Everything you need to change your life is already here. But when you have the blinders on of having the need to be right about the stuff that's not serving you, and when you take off those blinders, opportunities that you never would have gone for before suddenly become possible because money flows to me easily and freely.
I think that's a key thing because it's sort of like the Honda Civic rule. Like if you buy a Honda Civic, suddenly you notice all the other Honda Civics on the road.
Exactly.
And so if you suddenly have a positive mindset about money, all these opportunities that were there all the time, you start to notice and actually you start to develop the abilities to take advantage of those opportunities. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues to or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. So what happened with you specifically? Like, you've obviously gone from the garage to more success. Like, what happened along the way?
So one of the most, a million things, but really the most profound thing that just blew it wide open for me was I was so over being broke that I was like, I am going to do whatever it takes, which means making myself very uncomfortable and going to these seminars that if any of my friends had saw me in, I never would live it down, like with the name tag and the high-fiving and all that, whatever, that I was way too cool for, that, by the way, totally changed my life. So I'm at one of these money-making seminars and I'm in my little rah-rah thing. And this coach gets up on stage and she's talking about how she helps women entrepreneurs make money. And just the way that she was talking, she was hitting every single thing that I was coming up against. And I was like, oh my God, this woman has designed this entire speech for me. I've got to hire her as my coach. And at the time, I was making very little money, and her fee for coaching was 1/3 of my annual income.
Oh gosh.
And so and this was like 15, I don't even know how, 15 years ago, let's say. Life coaching now, and still, I don't even think you need any kind of certification. And back then it was super snake oil salesy, and I was really snarky anyway, but I had this intuition or this impulse. It's like, I need her help. And 1/3 of my annual income. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, that was so impossible. Now, if my mantra had still been, I can't afford it, which would have, come in real handy right then, I wouldn't have hired her. But because I was so obsessed with money flows to me easily and freely, I'm going to do whatever it takes, I put it on my credit card, and I ended up, and I literally threw up and then begged her to give me my money back. And thank God she was like, I will not give you your money back. And this may be the most important money you've ever spent. And then I did every single terrifying thing she told me to do. And I tripled my income in 3 months.
So what were some of the terrifying things she told you to do?
She told me to start an online business, which it's a very long story, but I'd already published a couple of books. And she's like, you could teach women entrepreneurs how to write and sell their nonfiction book proposals. And I was in a rock band. I was really cool. And I was like, I'm going to be a cheesy ass online marketer who's like the book proposal lady. I was like, are you fucking, like, this is not who I am. She's like, that's great. Would you rather be broke and cool or rich and cheesy right now? I was like, rich and cheesy. So I did that, which was an identity shift for me that, was extremely uncomfortable. And of course, I didn't have to stay in that exact space, but it did get me. I never would have written You Are a Badass if I hadn't done that. I can explain that, but.
And so like, how did you get your first clients?
Yeah.
And were you afraid to ask for a certain price?
Oh my, and she made me ask for a price that was extremely way outside my comfort zone. And every time I taught the course, she made me double it. And every time I doubled it, I was like, these people are going to think I am the greediest, la la la, and nobody's going to be able to afford it. I'm going to lose all my clients. And she's like, you'll lose some, and you'll gain some that are willing to pay that. And sure enough, I mean, it was so, the whole thing was so uncomfortable. I mean, you have to do stuff that scares the hell out of you, or else you're going to stay exactly where you are, because you got there by doing the easy thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened? So you got those first clients, like
Yep.
you advertised on Facebook or something, or you told people like, hey, I'll put your nonfiction book proposal together. I charge $1,000 or whatever it was. Can you say what you charged?
The first class was like $350. And it was an 8-week course. I coached them through writing theirs. But here's the thing, the reason she thought it would be such a good plan is because I was already involved in this women's entrepreneurial network. So she's like, you already have access to all these women. So I used that as sort of my first, and I hustled my ass off, and I studied online marketing, which is incredibly, people test down to the, like, if a capital T converts more sales than a lowercase t, it's a science. So I got really schooled on online marketing. I did free Facebook calls. I learned lead generation. Like, I got into this whole world that I knew nothing about. I was actually just talking to a friend this morning about how entrepreneurism is like, I don't know, 75% marketing and then 25% doing the actual job. It's about marketing. Otherwise, it's a hobby.
Yeah, it's so funny. I have this conversation with my business partner all the time. Most of our conversations are not about products or improving the product or whatever. We made the product, we assume it's good. But most of the conversation is about psychology, like our psychology, the psychology that people were dealing with, and which is essentially marketing. Like, how do we talk to somebody to, get a positive result? And you're right. And people don't know that about entrepreneurship. They think it's about going out on your own, being iconoclastic and different, and providing. Of course, you want to provide value. That's part of it, but you have to be able to sell. You have to be able to execute on selling something.
Yeah.
And finding demand. Finding demand for something is very difficult. So then what? I'm always curious, like, what led to You Are a Badass? Because this is fundamental to you change your habits from garage to you're the badass woman, and that was a huge game changer.
Yeah. So this online marketing thing where I was going to be rich and cheesy instead of cool and broke, and I studied it, and I learned the capital T versus the lowercase t and all that stuff. So I think this is a really important thing for everybody to really think about. What the next right step isn't necessarily forever, right? So believe me, I did not want to be the book proposal lady. I did not, the online marketing thing. But the most important thing for me was to get out of debt and to get out of financial struggle. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do what it takes. And it wasn't like I was becoming a ballerina. Like, I was already a writer. I was already kind of coaching people. Like, it wasn't so far out of my zone of what I was already doing and who I already identified as, but it was super fucking cheesy compared to, the whole enchilada. But the good news is, with online marketing, I had to write newsletters like 3 or 4 times a week. And I would write them in my voice. Like, I would write them the way I wrote. So I was taking something that I perceived to be pretty cheesy and writing it in my authentic writerly voice. And so when I was, again, reading every self-help book under the sun, because I was on a fucking journey to get this all figured out. And a lot of these books changed my life, such incredible authors and information. But I'm a writer. So I kept being like, I could write this and I could make it 10 times funnier and much more engaging and much quicker to the point, man. Like, I'm from New York and I'm really impatient and I just want the damn information. Like, just give it to me straight. Tell me what I got to do and I'll go do it. So I made them also very to the point. And so that's how You Are a Badass came to be, is I decided to write my own version of these self-help books. But I don't know if I ever would have done it if I already hadn't been doing this online marketing thing and taking something that was not, my brand and making it my brand.
And I think this is a critical point, which is that you were in the garage or whatever, you weren't feeling good about yourself financially, but you started with mindset, then you started taking actions. And I imagine the more you take action, the more you're believing the mindset, the more you're identifying as the person who does this. And it's kind of like this 1% a day type of thing where
Yes.
it starts to compound. Like if you do this every day, like then you started figuring, okay, well, I need to learn online marketing and I need to charge more. Then you started reading about online marketing. Then you started doing online marketing. Then you started getting clients and getting more confidence. And suddenly you were a badass.
Right.
And you also had the confidence and ability to write the book and the confidence and the ability to sell the book, just like you were helping other people do. And that book has become a mega bestseller. Like it's one of the best-selling self-help books like ever. I mean, it's changed your life. How to be a badass.
It still absolutely stupefies me what's happened with that book.
Like what? Like and I know I want to talk more about badass habits, but this is totally related to it. Like what changed it? What are some of the amazing things that happened afterwards?
After You Are a Badass?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it was a slow build. Like we didn't hit the New York Times bestseller list until 3 years after it was published, which is super weird, but it's because
That's unbelievable. I never
know.
heard of that before.
Yeah, and then it stayed on for 4.5 years. It's still on. It's on and off still. So
Why do you think it took? What happened? What was the trigger? Like 3 years later.
it was word of mouth. So no matter how much we promoted and did all the, bells and whistles, it was a kind of book because I'll tell you, I believe timing is everything. I'm really proud of the book. I think it's a good book and I nailed it timing wise because now you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a self-help book with a bright cover and a curse word in the title,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was the
There was
first
that
one.
trend.
Yeah. But I just got there first. So it was the first one. And then also, I guess the voice and, whatever. If it appealed to somebody, they would go out and buy 10 copies and give it to their friends. And then that friend, if they liked it. So my community just spread it like wildfire. And it took a while because, over time, more and more people kept passing it along. But I call it the yellow snowball because it just kept growing and growing and growing. So that's how it happened.
Well, that's really exciting. So, and now you, and obviously it led to other badass books, including this Badass Habits. And you've also You Are a Badass at Making Money. And I'm trying to think whether
You Are a Badass Every Day was the little guy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forget. We did a podcast, I think, on the Making Money one.
Yes.
And
that was a fun one.
Yeah. But mindset really is critical because there's mindset and there's ease. I feel like the ease part is a really important point. Like if you put your vitamins by the sink where you, I don't know, wash your hands every morning, you're more likely to take the vitamins, that sort of thing. So what are some other ways to create ease in these habits? Like let's say I also want to, again, some of these habits are harder than others. Like if I want to get into the habit of, I don't know, what's like a simple habit that people change? I want to get the habit of reading every morning. That's one kind of habit. But if I want to get into the habit of thinking that I'm capable of making a lot of money, that's a kind of a complicated mindset and habit change, I think. And what are ways to make that mindset change easy?
Okay, well, first of all, how hard is it? Like mindset, it's just a thought and it's just words and it's just creating a deep groove, right? So when you really think about the effort involved, it's not necessarily physical, which I tend to find much more difficult.
Yeah.
So it's really not. And I remember back in the day, like when I was like reading all these books about change, think positive thoughts and I was like, come on, like it can't be that easy. I could not have like been spending 40 years of my life being completely broken, scraping by if it really is all about mindset. It almost pissed me off. And I do think we make things harder because we need the drama or we feel like it's more mysterious or whatever. But it is so epically about mindset. I'm not saying you don't have to do stuff. You can't just sit around, meditating and stuff is going to appear magically. But it really, really, really starts with that. I mean, we've all done it. Like think about, if you're riding a bike up a hill, there is a point where you suddenly are like, fuck it. And you get off and start walking, right? And there's also a point where you're like, I'm just going to make it to the top. I'm just going to do these like 20 more yards. And especially if you're riding alongside somebody else, if they're just a little bit ahead of you, you'll push yourself harder, right? What does push yourself mean? It's a mindset. It literally is just like pushing your mind past the place where you normally give up. So it's all about mindset. Your mindset informs the actions you take. So to answer your question, so I'm changing my mindset about money. The steps I take is I start reading wealth consciousness books, Think and Grow Rich, You're Badass at Making Money. The Science of Getting Rich was the one that really worked for me. There are no lack.
I love that one, by the way. Wallace
Wallace
Waddles.
Waddles. Oh my God, the Waddles, right? I loved that book. And it was really short.
Yeah, it's short. And again, it's one of those things where, like, should I really be doing what he suggests? Does this work? But it can't.
What do you have
hurt.
to lose? What the
Yeah,
hell
that's
do
the
you
whole-
have to lose? Yeah.
That's the whole idea, is that I'll probably at least be happier even if I don't make money if I take his approach.
It's
So-
interesting. What do you have to seriously? What is the big whoop-de-doo? So reading the books. That's not hard. Like, and having that book by your bed, knowing which book you are reading, and you are reading for 10 minutes every single morning or whatever like getting it on the schedule and doing it. And then, for me, music was so huge, still is. Like, my mood can change in an instant depending on what I'm listening to. So I did, I was talking about how I put a moratorium on listening to Neil Young, even though I love Neil, but he makes me so depressed. So when I had to have energy to go do stuff that was challenging, I would make myself listen to Led Zeppelin, or I don't know what the hell it was, but something that pumped me up more. So that's real. Going out in nature and walking around, being physical, gets my energy going, can get me out of being depressed to feeling motivated. Certain people, I get off the phone with certain people, I feel like I can't do anything, or I feel like I can flip over a Buick, But the thing is getting specific. So if you're changing your wealth consciousness, you've got to surround yourself with people who have a really healthy attitude about money, who go out and make it and don't have shame about it and don't think all rich people suck. And, you got to surround yourself with people who are either where you want to be or past where you want to be. Other people are epic. And I know, like, the big thing is, well, I don't know anybody like that. Water does seek its own level, and we do hang out with people who are in our zone, who make us familiar. So when you change your identity, without a doubt, every single time I get a talk, I get asked this question every time. And people are always like, what do you do when the people closest to you don't support your growth? And the reason it comes up every time is because it's really upsetting when you feel
Yeah.
like you're fracturing these, lifelong relationships. And B, it happens every single time you change yourself. Every single time you are going to lose somebody, because you're basically killing off your old identity. And these people, people hate it when you kill the people they love, basically. And you're changing, and that's not okay. And so that's obviously going to change your relationship. And also, you're holding a mirror up to them, being like, listen, if I can do it, you can do it, because we're in the same place.
They don't
And
like to hear that.
They don't like to hear that. People hate unsolicited advice. So that is why when you go to lose weight, or you decide you're going to get married, or you decide you're going to get rich, or you're going to quit your steady job and, do whatever the hell you want to do, when you shift who you're being, the people closest to you are upset because they're the ones who stand to lose the most, right? Meanwhile, the guy down the street's like, go you, and your partner or your mother or your friends are making fun of you, or they're filling you with all these reasons why it's not going to work, or they're dragging you down. I certainly got made fun of by so many of my friends. Are you kidding me? Like, when I decided I was going to make money, it was, I definitely lost friends over it. And I definitely gained new friends that are that hold me up to a certain standard. And a lot of my old friends were supportive, but not all of them.
And so what does it mean you lost friends? Like, did suddenly people specifically say, I hate you, or they just stopped talking to you? Like, what happened, and were
Yeah.
you upset? Like, how'd you deal with it?
I got dumped by a couple people, who, one in particular who I'd been friends with for like 20 years, who was really close to me, just never spoke to me again, and never really explained why. But so I'm assuming that's what it was, but I can't imagine it was anything else. I don't know, but I'm assuming that was it. I got made fun of a lot, especially my family is pretty snarky. And, they're like, oh, Miss Moneybags or whatever. I still, but I'm getting the last laugh. It's like, okay, you can make fun of me, but I'm going to Italy for lunch. Have fun, so.
Yeah, well, one thing I learned is that you can never ask why. Why is this person doing this? Because you're never going to find out the correct answer, and there might not be an answer. They might not know the answer.
Well, you can. I mean, and certainly if it's a friend or, a person in your life that's really worth it, it can bring you closer. And I can, you can confront them and be like, I've noticed that this is making you really uncomfortable, and I love you, and I'd like to talk this out, and I'd like to hear why. And then, maybe it's going to get better, maybe it's going to get worse. But if it's a relationship worth keeping, it's worth having an uncomfortable conversation about.
I also like this idea of you talk a lot about non-negotiations. Like you don't want to negotiate with yourself. So like, oh, I'll have this one cigarette, but I'll run an extra lap in the morning. So it's sort of like you have to have everything kind of figured out in advance of how you're going to change a habit. That's an important part of the process. Because
Yes.
you also talk about rewarding yourself.
Yes.
So you're allowed to reward yourself, but it seems like you should figure out those rewards in advance as opposed to negotiating every day about it.
Yes, because it takes time, to like if you know what this is all part of the ease thing. If you know what your roadblocks are, like if you know that booze is going to trip you up, if you know that if you're trying to write a book and your kid's coming barreling in, like getting somebody to take care of your kids for the time you're writing, like, or if you know that social media is going to distract you, turn off the internet, get a babysitter. Like there are things you can do. You do not need to be a victim of your environment. If you plan ahead, and again, planning ahead, 5 minutes of your time, like think about it. What is going to throw you off course and then set yourself up for success. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, it could be not that hard, or it could be.
Here we go.
That's the problem. Is that because it like you say, it's not easy. Like it takes time. Like how long do you think it takes on average to like let's say you talk about identifying yourself as the type of person who could make money or who could do X or could learn languages, or let's say I want to be better at playing basketball. Can I really think of myself, oh, I'm identifying myself as a semi-pro basketball player? Like, I love this idea of like changing my mindset and identifying myself as someone who's already succeeded at what I'm trying to succeed at. And what's a good way to think about that? Like, what's the limit of that?
You know what I think is a really good way is loosening your bone, Wilma. Like just having fun with it, being like, I'm a pro basketball player. Like it just making, I mean, I talk also about like just seeing what you can get away with. It doesn't need to be such a big drama. We make such drama out of stuff. And it's like, well, it's not true. I've actually never made a basket in my whole life. So how can I perceive myself as this person? Who cares? Act like a little kid, like play with it a little bit, have some damn fun, This life is very fleeting. So pretend you are what you want to be and sort of play act, and it'll open you up to all the ways that you haven't seen before that can help you actually get to where you want to go.
I agree with that. Like, I think for me, my worst moments, surrender was very important. Giving myself small challenges along the way, kind of experimenting with what's possible along the way, and looking at what the worst case scenario, like you just did with the losing friends thing or the breaking up relationships thing. What is the actual worst case scenario? Usually it's not as bad as people think.
Right.
Like I think people think the worst case scenario is death or some sort of disappearance. And that's usually not the worst case scenario. Now, you have so many great stories in the book. Like what are some situations where somebody really had a hard time changing a habit, and what was the habit and what did they end up doing?
Oh gosh. This is like when somebody asks me to tell a joke. It's like I've never told a joke, or where should we eat? I've never eaten out.
Really, you don't eat out?
No, I'm kidding. But it's like
Oh.
I can never think of a restaurant. Like it's like I've never eaten in a restaurant before because my mind goes completely blank. Um, you know, I'll tell you just in general, it can take time and it can happen overnight. That's something I just want to say, like, no matter how difficult it is, like my journey with making money from being broke took time. Um, but it can also happen overnight. I mean, it's what they call in the self-help world is a quantum leap. Like it doesn't necessarily need to take forever, but sometimes it does. So I think that you just have to be game to do whatever it takes and to have patience and let it take as long as it takes. But I will tell you right now, I'm totally avoiding your question because I can't think of a specific habit, but the fastest way to change your life, no matter what the hell you're doing, is to do stuff that scares the shit out of you every single day. If you do something that scares the shit out of you, that's in the direction of the thing you want to change every day, you will get there so much faster than if you don't. If you,
Yeah,
yeah.
like what scares the shit out of you? Like what's something you do that scares the shit out of you? I'm
Okay.
asking that question again, but tell me
Okay.
a joke
Okay.
question.
Okay. Okay. So right now I'm single, and going up and talking to men who I find attractive scares the hell out of me sometimes, especially if he's really
That
hot.
that is scary.
Yeah. So I call it the stranger a day program, and I make myself talk to a stranger a day, and not just like my waiter. It has to be somebody I approach.
I remember reading in the book you could have as an objective, you want to flirt more, flirt with one person a day,
Yes.
and start easy. And sometimes that even requires a mindset. Like I remember talking to somebody who had met the Dalai Lama, and I asked her, "What was that like?" It was like he was looking at me the way a mother might look at their daughter. So I tried this thing where everybody I saw on the street, I was trying to picture them as if they were my daughter, whether they were male or female. I tried to picture them as if they were my daughter and how I would feel. And it made me automatically smile at people and think kindly about people. Usually I see people in the street and my instinct is to not like them. And but it kind of changed that for
Yeah.
me. So again, it really is important mindset, but then using it in practice. Like it's one thing to say, "Oh, I'm the
Yes.
type of person who can do something scary every day," but then you really have to do something scary every day. And that's good too, because then you get stories about it. Like, and it's fun conversation. "Oh, I did this today."
Yeah, and even if you fail and you're rejected and they're like, "Get out of my face, you whatever." Like at least you did it. Like you've got that and you're getting there and you've got the adrenaline rush and you're making changes. Like really, man, I feel like to bring it back around to this pandemic, it's made me realize how short life is, and how even though I feel like everything's at a standstill sometimes, it's also flying by so fast. And why not just see what you can get away with? Why not just, if you have something that you're really excited about or that you really truly desire, why not just see if you can get away with selling a painting for $100,000, or, becoming a pro basketball player, or what the hell? Who cares?
You have this great quote in the last chapter, which is called "The Audacity to Be Yourself," and the quote is, "Forming good habits isn't about being perfect; it's about being more of who you are." And that's such an important quote, particularly the second part. It's about being more of who you are. But sometimes when someone says, "Oh, James, just be yourself," or "You're going to give this talk, just be yourself," what does it mean though to be myself?
I think well, first of all, it's about desire. And I think it's really about, it sounds so fucking cheesy, but like following your heart. Like, what is it that you want to talk about that's important? What is it that you think you can connect with the people in front of you on that will light all of you up? It really is about unhooking from what's expected of you, or what you think you can do to get people to like you, and really coming from a place of joy. That's who you are.
Yeah, and this is really important. I mean, this is important in every aspect of life, but it's really important in writing. Like
Mm.
I had to write something for a publication that I had never written before recently, and I wrote my usual thing, and I'm like, "Oh, they're never going to go for this. This isn't what's in their magazine at all. This is my usual, like overly revealing, emotional kind of stuff." I just said, "Well, okay, but this is what people usually like with me, so I'm going to stick with it." And it does work to be yourself, as corny as that sounds.
And they loved it.
They loved it. And if they
Yeah.
hadn't, then it wasn't the right fit for me anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. The end.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, but I do find that during this pandemic, I have gotten a little bit more negative about outcomes for myself. And I really need to switch mindsets. I got more of the attitude like that won't work out, as opposed to like, "Oh, things usually, I always think of myself as like super lucky. And I kind of lost that magic a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know what it was from. It happened about halfway through. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
combination of things, but this is a habit I need to stop.
Well, it's really oppressive. Like this time, we're so spoiled with all of our freedoms, and we can do whatever we want. And it's the first time in my life, certainly, that I've really been prohibited from doing things that I totally took for granted. So that's a bit of a spanking and, whatever. So I think the thing is to get again into specifics for yourself. Like, why do I think that's not going to work out? And then, okay, so then that, pairing it, peeling the onion back, as it were, the way that we were doing with your fears, like, okay, so then what? So then what? So then what? Is that true? Is that true? Is that true?
Right.
And I do think for everybody, this is a time of really mastering patience. We have to wait longer for stuff right now. It's not, it still could happen overnight, but I think it's about patience and just leaning back and appreciating the silver lining of things going slower. Because there is a ton of stuff that I never would have noticed, that I never would have experienced if I hadn't been blocked from running 1,000,000 miles an hour like I usually do. It's been really educational and challenging and lovely.
Jen Sincero, Badass Habits. When does this book come out?
It's out now in hardcover and paperback December 7th.
And how's it going so far?
Amazingly well. I am just, I'm so proud of everybody for buying it, because it means people are sort of like, okay, bitch, pandemic, I'm going to get my act together in spite of you. So it's doing really well. And I'm so grateful to everybody who's been following and buying and working on themselves to make themselves and the world a better place.
And what are you going to do the next book on?
I am not sure, and I am going to do a little bit more speaking, I think, is my plan.
Are there speaking gigs happening now?
I'm writing a performance that I will do when the pandemic lightens up a bit.
Oh, that's neat. What kind of performance?
I honestly don't know yet, but I realized that I'd rather reach more people than crank out more books. Right now, I mean, I will write more, but right now I'm like, okay, I've got this awesome stack of books. It's still helping people. So why don't I get out there and sort of talk? And also, I miss humans, man. I want to see some humans.
Yeah.
I want to sit in a robe in a room by myself and crank out another book right now. I really want to get out in the world.
See, my problem is the pandemic lifestyle was perfect for me. I like sitting in a robe in a room and never leaving. And now people are like, hey, you should go out more. I'm like, I don't know. Not yet. It's not safe yet.
I know.
Jen, thanks once again for coming on the podcast. Badass Habits. I really enjoyed it. It got me thinking about my own negative habit. There's always negative habits to change. There's always drift. Like you could have positive habits for a long time and then drift. And you have to remind yourself of that, as you put it, remember where you are. Remember to remember.
Exactly.
And it's something I have to do frequently. But thank you for writing this book and for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It is always such a treat to talk to you.
Thanks.
Entresto, sacubitril valsartan tablets, is the #1 heart failure brand prescribed by cardiologists and has helped over 1 million people with heart failure. It's a prescription medicine that treats adults with long-lasting chronic heart failure and works better when the heart cannot pump a normal amount of blood to the body.
Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or aliskiren, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. Don't take with aliskiren or within 36 hours of taking an ACE inhibitor. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Angioedema is swelling of your face, lips, tongue, and throat that may cause death. If it causes difficulty breathing, get emergency help.
Ask your doctor about Entresto. To learn more, visit support.entresto.com or call 833-446-6699. For pricing, visit Entresto.com/cost. If you can't afford your medication, Novartis may be able to help.